Okay, so this is the first section of the new unit, and there's not a corresponding section in your book, so we're going to just kind of condense this all into one. In your book, it's kind of spread out throughout the entire book. So we're going to be solving multi-step word problems. Now, sometimes when you solve real-world problems in math, algebra, whatever, the method you use is not readily apparent. Not every problem fits neatly into what we've been doing, where we've had it set up where this is your biggest number. You look at the last, what the question is asking for, and that's going to be your coefficient. This is the variable, and then this is the number that's left, or, the constant. Okay? The problems that you're going to be seeing today often have multiple ways of solving them and requires that you think logically. Okay, so the first thing you want to do when you get an answer is, does this make sense? Okay, so let's see what the heck I'm talking about. So in this first example, we have a recipe for 4 dozen shortbread cookies, and it uses 500 grams of flour, 450 grams of butter, and 200 grams of sugar. And we need to find out how much of each ingredient would be required to make 60 cookies. So there are a lot of different ways that you could solve this. I'm going to show you 3 of them. The first one, let's use that to figure out the flour. Well, you can solve up a proportion. This is 48. Where did I get that? Well, there are 4 dozen cookies in this recipe, and we need that translate to 48 cookies because there's 12 in a dozen. So since we have 4 dozen, we have 48. So I take that 48 cookies and put it over 500, which is the number of grams of flour, and we set it equal to 60 because remember, this is the cookies here, and this is a flour, and this needs to match across. So we know it's 60 cookies, and we need to find out how much flour. So you figure out your cross products. 500 times 60 is 30,000, and then you have 48 times x, which is 48x. And then to solve for x, you just divide both sides by 48, which gives you 625 grams of flour. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. Another way would be to say, okay, well, what am I multiplying this by to get this? So you can take that 60 and divide it by 48, and you're going to come up with 1.25, and that's what you would multiply each one of these by to figure out how much you need for that. Okay, because everything goes up with the same ratio. So then all I would need to do is take that 450 grams of butter times it by 1.25, which would give me 562.5. So we need 562.5 grams of butter. The last method that I'm going to show you at least would be to make a number line. Okay, so we have 0 here. This is what we were given, 48, so right there. And 60 is what we need to find. And how did I get these other numbers? Well, the difference between 48 and 60 is 12. So I tried going down by 12 each time, and it happened to come out even. Because this would be 36. This would be 24. 12 is actually here, and actually 0 is over here. So you can then say, okay, well, at 0 cookies, I need 0 grams of sugar. At 48, I knew I needed 200. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 different, we're dividing that 200 up by 4. 200 divided by 4 is 50, so the rate of change is 50. So we drop by 50 each time. Again, 0 is over here. Okay? So that means that if we increased by the same rate, we would need 250 grams of sugar. Okay, so again, you just need to find the method that works for you. Another way to do it would be to create a graph, but we'll be getting into graphing later, so you can look at it then. All right, let's look at this next example. It takes Mr. Higgins 50 minutes to reach Morton West High School from home on Monday morning. He traveled at the average speed of 65 miles per hour. How far away is the school from his home? Round your answer to the nearest tenth of a mile. Okay, so first thing we want to do is we want to find out how far away it is, okay? But it takes me 50 minutes. Okay. Here, the rate of speed, we've got 65 miles per 1 hour. But my answer up here, the information I'm given, is in minutes. So let's convert that to 65 miles in 60 minutes. Okay. Now we're going to write again a proportion. And we don't know the distance, so that's going to be our variable because we don't know the miles. What we do know is that it takes me 50 minutes to get there. So again, use your cross products. 65 times 50 equals 60x. Okay, and if you plug that into your calculator, and again did 65 times 50 and then divided by 60, you would come up with x equals 54.16 repeating. But I did say round to the nearest tenth. Okay, the 10th place is right there. So remember, if the place next to it is 5 or higher, we round up. So we'll just say 54.2 miles from home. And that would be my answer to that problem. Okay? Hopefully it's starting to make a little bit of sense. Alright, so in this next example, they're getting a little bit more difficult. Okay? It took 3,420 hours for Calvin to hike the Appalachian Trail, which is a distance of 2,184 miles. What was the average speed that Calvin hiked in yards per day? Okay? That's very important to look at there. Round your answer to the nearest yard. So, we need to find out a few things here. First, we need to convert our distance from miles to yards. 1 mile equals 1,760 yards. Okay, that might not be something that you remember. Most people remember that there's 5,280 feet in a mile. But most, at least football players, should know that there are 3 feet in a yard. So I can take that 5,280 feet, which equals a mile, and I can say that there are 3 feet in 1 yard. So I can take 5,280 divided by 3, and that's going to give me my yards there. Okay, so I've converted that. The next thing I'm going to need to keep in mind for later is that there's 24 hours in a day. Okay, now this isn't going to divide evenly into there, so what we'll do is we'll tackle that at the end. So for now, let's set this up. You always want to kind of do distance over time. It's easy to remember for, rate, which is what we're trying to find out, the average speed. When we're talking about speed, we're talking about a rate, miles per hour, feet per second, that kind of thing. So we're going to take our distance, which is 2,184 miles, and we're going to put it over 3,420 hours. Okay? And then what we need to do is we're going to say, okay, we want to find out the rate in 1 day. Okay, 1 day equals 24 hours. Okay, so we can take that, instead of writing 1 down here and converting it, we're just going to say 24 hours, because that's what we're trying to find. Okay, notice how this and this match up, and this should give us our distance in miles. So remember what they're asking for. Okay, we're not going to be done when we find out what x is. So when you do this, again, do your cross products. 2184 times 24 equals 3,420x. Okay, so if you do all that, you'll find that x equals 15.3. Okay, so we've got our miles per day, but we need to know how many yards per day. So now that's where this comes into play. We know that 1 mile equals 1,760 yards. So we can just take that 15.3 and multiply it by 1,760, which is going to give you 26,974 yards. So he hiked 26,974 yards per day, which should be your answer. Okay? We'll be going through these problems in class. I know it might seem a little bit difficult now, but maybe watch it a second time just to see if anything kind of sticks this way around, or the second time around, and make sure you take really, really good notes. And if you see a method, like in the first problem where I did the 3 different methods, there's one that you like, see if you can apply it to this. Okay? That is all.